The field traverse of the country by the National Unity Platform leader Robert Kyagulanyi has set in motion what will undeniably be an electoral contest between him and whoever the National Resistance Movement picks for its flag bearer. The Electoral Commission, on its part, has already outlined a roadmap leading to the already heating up 2026 presidential election. But NUP has been quietly complaining of the sluggish nature in which government has pursued electoral reforms, key among them, reforms that would seek to punish officers who commit electoral offenses. Tonight on The Spot we ask, will Uganda hold the 2026 presidential election with the same electoral infrastructure that NUP protested, rejected, and sought to change in 2021? And to discuss this, we have Benjamin Katana, a lawyer for the party and its national treasurer. We are also joined by Yona Musinguzi, an NRM Party member and MP for Ntungamo Municipality. Mr. Benjamin Katana and Honorable Yona Musinguzi. Gentlemen, thank you so much for having honored our invitation. A warm welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure, and good evening to our viewers.
May I, in this discussion, refer to you as Benjamin and Yona?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Especially for me who has no title.
I feel comfortable. Very important.
Okay, Benjamin and Yona. So let me begin with you, Benjamin, because the Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi, President of the National Unity Platform, is traversing the country. He has begun with Western Uganda. He was in Mbarara a couple of days back and in my home city of Fort Portal, and before that in Kasese. So far, how is that journey like? And are you really getting to your core intentions?
Well, thank you very much. Once again, good evening to you and all our viewers. The trek so far is very warm. He has been received by mammoth gatherings in all the places that he has been to, and there have been minimal interruptions and unnecessary interferences from the security apparatus. And ordinarily, a party president and a political party doing a national tour is normal business. But in a society like ours, where political position has been criminalized, that is why it is making a lot of news that a party president has been to a district and he has not been interrupted by the security apparatus. But ordinarily, a party that is registered and allowed to conduct business is doing the normal thing that shouldn't even raise a lot of questions. But yes, I would like to appreciate all the people of Uganda and supporters that have accorded him and the team a very warm reception wherever he has been. And it is evidence that the people of Uganda are ready for the message of change like they have been. And that if I may mention at this point that it is part of our continued effort to build civic competence and build resistance, because many times what has caused us challenges is not necessarily lack of support from the population, but unnecessary interruption and interference from agents of the incumbent. And in a situation where there has been a fusion between the incumbent and the state of Uganda, you find that all the officers of the state are dragged into partisan politics as active participants on the side of the incumbent. And therefore, you find that you're dealing with who ordinarily should be keeping law and order are working as agents of the incumbent, disrupting, party activities. And so we had hoped from the events in Mbarara and Fort Portal that maybe the regime has reached its Damascus point and it is all turning into Paul. But the events of switching off radio, him being denied access to a radio station, Radio Messiah in Kasese, where we had paid for airtime, and the actions of the police in Kabale. I don't know if you saw the pictures, but I'm sure some of the viewers saw the pictures where the police brought a fire brigade truck, blocked the road, and earlier on in the morning we were getting reports that people were being beaten to go back home. It's a clear indication that it's far from Damascus. But our
Damascus turnaround. But
our duty and responsibility is to continue mobilizing people to build resistance, to push back against the excesses of the regime.
Definitely in Imbarara, in Fort Portal and Kasese, to many NUP supporters and NUP members, that was like a pleasant surprise that nothing happened and everything seemed nearness, more or less going in like a well-oiled machine. How do we explain that? That now, because we have always been thinking there's going to be a collusion course, and there is no collusion course. Who do you think behaved much better this time around?
I wouldn't say that it was a surprise, because dictatorships like the one we are dealing with are like amoeba. They keep changing form and shape for survival. And so in one day you'll find people behaving decently, and the next day they are behaving in a manner that is far from decent. So the actions are welcome where people abide by the law. But when they choose to break the law, it is also not surprising, because that is within the DNA of systems that are like the one we are dealing with here.
Benjamin, are you suspicious that this kind of character, this kind of scenario you have seen in Imbarara and Fort Portal could be deceptive, probably, that could turn around any time? You seem to be a very suspicious man. That this.
I'm not just suspicious, but I'm a student of history and practical politics, and I know that the regimes that take the trend like ours is taking are normally manipulative, deceptive. Today they will be putting on this color, the next day they will be putting on another. I don't mean the party colors, but in terms of behavior and conduct. That is why they hold elections, not because they want the aspirations of the people to emerge, but because they want to create an impression that there is democracy in a country.
Okay.
But when in actual sense, the results will not count. So it's not surprising. It is something that we know we have to deal with, but we have a job to do, and we must do it.
All right, let me turn to the Honorable Yona Musinguzi, and I'm not going to look at you as a spokesperson of the NRM, but since you're also from the NRM and you subscribe to the party and you're from Ntungamo Municipality, I looked at the tagline of the Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi. It is saying, "Wake up Uganda," some kind of tour, "Wake up Uganda" campaign. Normally when somebody is telling another person to wake up, it is in reference to maybe a danger around them, so that they can do things differently. Definitely, he's not telling them to wake up and support NRM. You who are in NRM must be maybe on your tenterhooks to see a former presidential candidate telling Ugandans, wake up. Because that wake-up call could mean something negative to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kamara. When my friend Kyagulanyi, Honorable, tells the nation and moves around the nation telling them to wake up, it's a good slogan. I don't know his intentions, why he tells them to wake up. I don't know when they were asleep, because I remember he was a good competitor. He tried his best. I think he gained 35% from the nation. But today, when he says wake up, I would ask my brother here, have they been sleeping?
No, the people of Ntungamo, are they sleeping?
The people of Ntungamo voted NRM, but
and he wants them to wake up from that slumber.
I would want to thank government for having given him a platform to wake up his voters. I don't know where he has been for the last. Today we voted in 2021. Today is 2023. That means it is a lapse of 2.5 to 3 years, and I think he has a reason why he thinks he should wake up. Where has he been? I've been seeing him going to America, going where? Is he telling them that now he's back and he wants them to wake up. But I understand it's not, it is imperative upon him as the leader of his party to wake up his members and galvanize support, and it is the voters to judge.
So when you see mammoth gathering, he talked about mammoth gathering in Ibarara and Fort Portal, and you who subscribe to the NRM Party, when you see big numbers of people coming to welcome the Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi in more or less like your home turf, does that scare you?
I know in a democratic dispensation, it is important to, democracy is very expensive, and it is important for even the ruling party, even if we think we have the numbers, we have to listen, we have to give chance, since it is democracy, to other people with dissenting views, minority they would be. Actually, numbers can be lying. Numbers does not mean that the vote is in the ballot box. It is not, they don't tally. So I don't think there is any scare for my brother Kyagulanyi to move around and gather big numbers, everyone around him.
But so sometimes it may not even be about the votes, the numbers of the votes, but the guy who counts the votes. Is that what you mean?
No, what I'm trying to say, you understand what I'm saying? Because we have been in this for long. You go here, you make a rally, you have 20 people, someone makes a rally here, he has 5,000 turn-up of people. Maybe because of, there are many reasons why. And at the end of the day, the one who had a small rally gets the vote in a fair election. But that is not the point. But him moving around, sensitizing his people is fundamental and is very important. And I want to thank the government apparatus for having given him that portfolio to allow him move around.
It's not something that's given like charity, the Honorable Yona. It is his right as a presidential, as a party president, to go open offices and do what is within the mandate and what in a democratic dispensation they're in. So, so it's not like it has been given and so you have to thank the NRM, in my view. But let me explain to us what that slogan is all about. Because when you talk about Wake Up Uganda, it's a kind of slogan in my view.
Have they been sleeping?
Mr. Katana, it's a kind of slogan that could actually, you know, scare the guys across the aisle, but also maybe bring you in a collusion course. Because it looks like, more or less like you're in a presidential campaign of sorts, and yet it's not yet time.
Why would they be scared by people waking up? Are they guilty of, you know, if being scared that people are being told to wake up? But basically, let me break this down.
Wake up and do what?
Let me break this down. That NUP is an offshoot of an idea called people power that is anchored on a mission of liberation. The liberation that we have been explaining, that currently Uganda is under the yoke of dictatorship. And I want to break that down because many times people say, but you come on radio and speak. But basically that you have an individual and a small group that have control over the institutions of government, that when a judicial officer is making a decision, he asks himself or herself that will this decision sit well with the people that have power. It's not about the law. When Parliament is discussing a matter, the members of Parliament and the presiding
officer of court.
And the presiding
officer. You are an officer of court. Is that really the feeling you get when you're representing your client?
In many cases.
Is that what you think?
In many cases.
And in many cases. Before the judges, you know,
I'll give you an example.
Biased.
I'll give you an example. And this may not necessarily be a court, but an institution clothed with almost the same powers as court. After the Arua incident, and the time when they stopped the Honorable Kyagulanyi from organizing concerts, I went with him to lodge a complaint in one of the institutions of the state of Uganda. And the officer charged with the responsibility, and I will not mention the name because unfortunately he has no right of reply since he's now deceased.
So I'm sure you're talking about the Uganda Human Rights Commission, because that's where you should have gone.
So the person was very, very clear with us. He said, you guys must appreciate that you're dealing with a military dictatorship. The only way I can help you is to negotiate with these people. But even if you lodge a complaint, I will never hold any hearing. And so that is the depth. Now, when people are discussing in Parliament, they are worried about another arm of government or individuals that are watching and are going to hold them accountable for the views they have expressed. And so that is the yoke that we want to break, so that we establish a government run on the democratic principles of justice, equity, fairness, and generally work towards improvement of the livelihoods of the people of Uganda.
So now, the way how you have explained it, Benjamin, it actually looks like you are almost or 100% in a campaign.
Well, ours is a continuous journey. Like I mentioned, that we are on a liberation.
And for you to be in a sort of a quasi-presidential campaign before the time, sooner or later is going to bring a collusion cause, and you lose the argument.
Kamara, we are not campaigning. I mentioned that we are on a liberation mission. Our responsibility and duty is to continuously engage this oppressive system at all frontiers. That is why you have seen us in campaigns, even when we know that elections have problems.
Yeah, but that's why now that liberation mission is to decampaign the NRM government that is in power.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, because you have seen the ills and the weakness of the state that is running the government, and you are saying it's a dictatorial, and you're telling Ugandans, wake up, you are decampaigning it. You are more or less in a presidential campaign before
liberation is anchored on resistance against oppression. So our job now, and what we are doing, what the team is doing when you see them in Fort Portal, in Barara, and here, is to continuously build civic competence and resistance, so that the people of Uganda can be able to stand up to the oppressive system and say, this is our country. Our voices must be heard. We must have a government that is serving the people, not serving a few people. So basically, we are not campaigning. We are not in a campaign, but we are executing our mandate as leaders of a liberation struggle to raise the civic competence of the population of Uganda, build resistance of the people of Uganda to stand up against the oppressive regime.
They are trying to build a civic competence in Uganda. They are trying to have a vibrant citizenry of Uganda. If we have a civic competence in Uganda, and you have vibrant citizens of Uganda, can NRM survive?
Well, the liberation my brother Katana is talking about, and I would ask the question, whom are they liberating? And them sensitizing and moving around, and they say they are not campaigning, it's okay. But what is the voter down there that you are trying to liberate? What are you liberating him from? Which oppression? You should tell him the oppression. Which, I mean, we may move around 1,000 times. Today you come to me, tomorrow you come to me. But what are you telling me? What are you bringing on table that is different from what is prevailing today? If you don't have any good agenda to convince the voter down in Ntungamo, you are moving around, you are waking up people, will all be for nothing. You'll waste time. Because wherever they have moved, I've been listening to them. I had them in Mbarara, I have them where I'm waiting for them to come in Ntungamo, and I hope they will come peacefully. And I would want them to move all over the country peacefully without anyone interfering them. But if you have not packaged a big package, bigger than NRM, better than NRM, an alternative solution that is better than what NRM manifesto has.
But Honorable Yona, perhaps you don't understand, you don't feel it because you are from the privileged class, the elite, well, fairly good salary, and probably comfortable. But Ugandans are hurting. They are feeling the financial squeeze. Ugandans, if they go to hospital now, sometimes it's even hard to get medicine in most cases. Ugandans feel the problem of corruption that has put a stronghold on the country. Ugandans, some of them feel excluded. I mean, these are the realities.
In his backyard, how many children can come from Chamate and join entire school today? Like Museveni came from Chamate and joined entire school.
Kamara, I'm a scholar of fight against corruption, and you should have heard me very well. I told them, I've heard the president of NUP, Mr. Kyagulanyi. I've heard him in Kasese, in Mbarara, in your village in Fort Portal. But his packaging is not about to raise those points. He's talking about different things. Yeah, I don't understand what he was saying. But if you talk of corruption, as a party, we need to clear our own house. And some of us have not relented on that. We know the services that are behind, which are lacking. Like he's saying, I know what is in Chamate. We don't have electricity. Even in Ntungamo, we have only 20% coverage of electricity.
Today, the NRM government, the executive and ministers themselves are facing serious allegations of defrauding the vulnerable, taking away, and I'm calling them allegations because some of them are still in court, serious allegations of defrauding the vulnerable, the most poor, the poor of the poor, and they've taken from them. You think Ugandans are not watching? You think Ugandans are not concerned? If somebody tells them, wake up, they are stealing your babati. You think Ugandans, when they wake up, are they going to wake up and pat you on the back?
Mr. Kamara, not on the mabati. We can talk of corruption, and it is a big topic here. We shall be here for the next 30 years.
When Benjamin and company say, wake up, they're not going to wake up and pat you on the back. When they wake up and they find you have stolen from them, this is going to be a fight.
Mr. Kamara, look here. If they had an alternative solution to convince the masses that please wake up, this has been like this. Me, I have an alternative system that will help Ugandans to curb corruption. This is not what they are doing. This is what I was telling you. This is what if they had an alternative solution from what NRM has packaged, maybe their masses would be scaring to some of us.
Yona and Benjamin, gentlemen, hold on to your points because we're going to take a break. On the spot, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. My guests tonight are Benjamin Katana, who's a lawyer of NUP, also Treasurer General, and we have the Honorable Yona Musinguzi, Member of Parliament representing Ntungamo Municipality. I know there has been a clamor and call for electoral reforms. In fact, even High Court had given recommendation calling for the electoral reforms. And NUP was not happy to run under the kind of infrastructure, electoral infrastructure that was then available. We are almost 2 years away. The roadmap is out. The electoral reforms are not there like you want them. So what's going to happen?
Well, first of all, like you mentioned, this is not a new call. There has been a call that the electoral processes need to be streamlined further. That is not to say that the biggest challenges we have are because of the gaps in the electoral laws. But one of the key recommendations and one of the key things that we have raised time and again, and people who came before us raised, is the interference of the electoral processes by members of the armed forces. And even when we have raised these complaints in meetings with the Electoral Commission has responded that we are not the commanders of these soldiers, but yet Electoral Commission is the lead agency in management, but what has become is management of electoral processes. So the demands for reforms are aimed at, one, ensuring that the processes are more transparent, and two, ensuring that the electoral processes are not reduced into a ritual like it has become in Uganda and like it is in most of the countries that are laboring with dictatorial regimes. The country now, the world now has been watching the events in Gabon, the man had just declared himself a winner, like it has been happening here and elsewhere. So the biggest challenge we have, Kamara and our viewers, is not necessarily gaps in the electoral laws, but that we have a fusion, like I mentioned at the beginning, between an individual and the state of Uganda. That General Museveni now has become Uganda. So even if you come up with these reforms, for as long as he's going to pick Yona, but I wish that he wins. So there are no chances of him. There are no chances of him losing. But you have an NRM candidate losing in a constituency in Ntungamo or Kapchorwa, and then the next day he's appointed as an arbiter in electoral matters by one of the participants, that you certainly cannot have justice. So now, if that is the diagnosis, if that's the diagnosis, the political diagnosis that you have made, so how do you rectify that? And I'm coming to that. Mm-hmm. And part of why regimes of this nature reduce elections into mere rituals is to make sure that the citizens lose interest in electoral processes, so that every electoral cycle they are returned with 90%, like it happened under Hosni Mubarak, like it happened under Saddam and other regimes of that nature. So our resolve is that we must engage this regime at all frontiers. That's why you have seen us participate in electoral processes. It's not because we have faith in the processes, but our position has been that their plan is to discourage us from participating in this. We shall not leave them to run it the way they want. But that's why we, now, when there are no elections, we are out there mobilizing people and building resistance. What I've seen, Benjamin, what I've seen is, for example, here in central Uganda, where you mobilize the supporters, where you are able to protect the vote, where you overwhelm the system with votes, no one could beat you. So why is it that you could not transplant that in another area of Uganda, that the winning formula in this part of Uganda can be the winning formula in the north and in the Karamoja region? The problem is if you only focus on winning and losing. But are you aware that even here in Central, where we won, the processes were manipulated so that we win with very small margin? The number of polling stations that were cancelled, for example, in Wakiso. These are facts that you can establish. So are you saying what you won in Central Uganda was given to you? Our argument was it not a deserving win? Would have won with more if the processes had not been interfered with. And I'm still answering your question, Mr. Kamara, that, and here in Uganda and the Central generally, the levels of vigilance, not only by the voters, but the media and the rest. I'm sure you saw videos of soldiers sticking ballot papers in some of the constituencies in Western Uganda, where I come from. I'm sure you saw reports of polling stations in Western Uganda, in one of the districts, where even nobody had died, nobody was sick, nobody was absent. There was 100% turn up. And so the explanations are many, but part of the reason is that these far-flung places where there's minimal media coverage, where there's minimal involvement of observer missions, the rigging is more massive than it is in areas that are closer to the city. And that explains why you see the differences come. And certainly there are some polling stations where General Museveni got more votes than we did. And he would even genuinely get more votes. But our point, and which is backed by facts, is that most of those polling stations and electoral areas, there was a lot of manipulation of numbers. Okay, you're talking about the electoral, for example, challenges, the violence and all that. You come from Ntungamo Municipality and you're a member of parliament there. Really, the
elections in your municipality
He was even rigged in the NRM primaries himself.
almost like a war. You know, I remember at one point there were you know, battle wagons stationed in Ntungamo as if Ntungamo was a garrison town. You, Ntungamo, where you fight for the political mandate during elections like a war zone.
Mr. Kamara, I'm not a soldier. That I don't know. For generals, we can ask the general.
No, I'm saying
however,
what you see with on the ground, the deployment and the harassment, and you know, and the military assets that are deployed on the ground.
Mr. Kamara, I don't participate in buying the military attire or armory, but my issue is my brother says an election today is a ritual. And today you've told me they have been gunning around, moving around the whole country, gathering morale and vigor and conversing votes. That's the truth. So if it's a ritual, why do they still participate in a ritual? That's one. Two, like you put it, when they win Buganda, if opposition wins Buganda, there it was free and fair. When they lose in Ntungamo, then that one is not fair. Now, for us, I don't know whether I'm allowed to air out my local dialect here. But in my village, they say, Omuhinjimbi, atefuka anjejirechi, worker blames his tools.
You know, there's another version of the same proverb that it can be.
A poor worker blames his tools. But for electoral reforms, I would generally, minus the presidential election, even the parliamentary election, electoral reforms are very important. And I don't think there are very many here. Actually, we have the best electoral reforms in the country here, in south of Sahara, and also of Kalahari. But who is the implementer? That's the problem, number one. Secondly, when the dispute comes, where are you going to? Like my brother was saying here, you find someone has been recycled, he contested in an election, he failed, but because of his proxy and his connections, tomorrow is the person you are finding in a court. He's the same person you are finding here to judge you whether you want him or not. So regardless of the presidential election, even us in the parliamentary election, up to the council election, these electoral reforms, if they're implemented to the latter, we don't need to add anything. But who is the implementer? When you get a dispute, where are you going? When you are in the Tare Center, who has changed the declaration form? Why would we still be in that archaic old fashion, an uncouth old fashion of someone changing a declaration form? Why don't we have a biometric and electronic voting like Kenya is doing? I sit after an election day, I sit in the Tare Center, and
I hope you know that the Kenyans have been on the streets, and one of the reasons that that election was rigged.
Yeah, but they are asking open the servers because the servers are there.
At least for them, they have the servers. Are there. There is no one who is going to change a declaration form. But now here, commercialization of politics. So now it has become too much.
So Benjamin, it looks like you don't want even to use the institutions available that are supposed to give you a remedy, because you're not sure whether you come through parliament or any other means, whether it can give you the reform that you require. Probably you only want to build competence, the civic competence. Then when you arm the people, when you awaken them, what do they do?
You see, most of the institutions, if not all, are compromised. And it has context. You see, dictatorships are like diseases that kill immunity of the body. If a person gets a disease that destroys the immunity, it means that any other disease will come and easily take advantage of the vulnerability of this person. So our state institutions, like I mentioned at the beginning, because of that fusion,
there's a democracy deficiency syndrome. Let's give it a name.
Exactly. So the institutions are compromised. They are under the control of an individual, which individual has selfish interests in the political and governance matters of this country, who is the incumbent, General Museveni. So these institutions, even if you run to them, they are under his call and beckon. When Parliament is investigating a corrupt officer and he says that nonsense must stop, it stops. I don't want to use the example of my brother here. Sometime I saw him on TV. He was asking one of the ministers to account for money.
150 billion.
The minister for science and
Musenero.
Musonero. The president said, this is a decorated officer. How can you investigate them? The other day when there was an investigation on Uganda Airlines, he said this must stop, and it stopped. So these institutions have no capacity to withstand the influence of
so you want to
Museveni.
totally disregard and bypass them, and then how do you reach your desired goal?
We engage them, and I think you have seen us in court, not on account of them of us having faith in them, but because they are the available ones. But in the meantime, as we do that, we must engage the population, because you see, all that we are doing is not for us as individuals. It is for the people of Uganda. What we are doing is providing leadership. And the people of Uganda must understand the power dynamics and how they have lost their power to an individual. What we have now is an imperial president, like the governor that we had here. The governor would levy tax, use the army, use police, to whip people in Ntungamo, in Toro, in Busoga, to grow raw materials for Her Majesty's government. So and no accountability, no checks and balances. Even today, we have an imperial president. He has all these arms of government that he's using to make sure that what his will passes, whether it is in the interest of Uganda, whether it is in his personal interests, and nobody, no institution of government can stand up to him. Okay,
Honorable Yona.
I would want to diverge from my brother here, because the last election, the voter turn-up was only 57%, meaning 43% did not turn up. And I want to remember that your president got 35% in the election. If you are talking of imperialism, dictatorship, and why didn't you sensitize the other 57%, I mean 43% that did not turn up? You add it on your 35 and you take the show.
And I'm glad he has raised the point of voter turn up. And it feeds into what I mentioned earlier, that dictatorships reduce elections into rituals, so that people lose interest in the processes. They know that our votes won't count. So some of them say, even if I go and vote against Yona, I'm wasting my time. No. When you go to campaign in the village, one of the things they ask you now,
if you knew it was
is your ability.
You wouldn't have participated in the election.
I mentioned that for us, our resolve is that we must engage this system at all frontiers. So we will not, if the intention is to discourage people from participating in these processes, we will not be part of that conspiracy. When time comes for us to go and mobilize people and build resistance like we are doing now, whether there are elections or no elections, we shall do it.
Okay.
If there is any avenue available to challenge the system, we will be there.
Clearly, you can see that for now, momentum is with the National Unity Platform. They are able to speak to the young people. They are able to get the crowds in Imbarara and Fort Portal and Kasese. And by the way, these crowds, I'm told, unlike other places, they are no goodies. So you can imagine guys are coming without hoping there are no goodies, but they're coming.
No food.
And that is really telling.
They are coming is not a challenge to
I'm told in Teso there were some goodies. So doesn't that, don't you really, when you look at that momentum of young people who are coming to give support?
You mean in NRM there are no young people? What are you trying to insinuate here?
I'm talking about the crowd that have turned up, and they seem to be having the momentum.
You are talking of the momentum of the young people.
In the absence of Bilao.
But in NRM we also have young people, and we have not yet given you our candidate. We don't know. So tell me about the generational cause. I understand what the generational cause means in the next election 2026. But don't scare us with your numbers and the young people. We also have young people in NRM.
But he's raising very critical issues that should be of concern, because where our country is, the violence, the electoral violence that you see, the rigging that happens, the misuse of state resources and state agencies, the police that stops from policing and does politicking. I mean, those are serious issues. Even you'd want to have a clean slate.
Within my heart, I would believe in a democratic, free and fair election. I don't know why they call it free and fair, why they don't call it 100% or the best election. Why do they call it free and fair? I don't know why. We can be another discussion for another day. But I would love a democratic election which is free and fair. And I would, we have been in America, we are watching, they are up to date. They are still investigating the former president, how he interfered with the election. And I want to believe that this time around, a new entrant getting 35% was a big achievement to you people of NUP, but you failed to get the show. So accept telling us that it is a ritual election and you are still participating, even as today you are still mobilizing in my village, in Imbarara, in your home, in Kasese. That means you are seeing sanity in the election. That's why you have started even to mobilize.
I think Yona has a point, because for you to be able to say, well, you can move, you can call your people, they can come, open an office, go to different towns, even yourself admit it is moving on well.
Like
granted, this is what democracy is all about.
Like I mentioned earlier, that dictatorships are like amoeba. I think you know amoeba. They keep changing shapes.
They're a chameleon.
But now that they have not changed the shape,
Today, we have people in prison who were arrested during the elections of 2021. And I can even mention their names. One of them is a lady called Olivia Rutaya.
From where?
She's in Ruzira. Another one is Seguja Mache. There are several.
Yeah, but those are court issues. No. You know
and
even us in NRM, we still have people who are still in court.
And so, because today, just 2 months ago, our teams that went to the same region in Toro were beaten. Some of them are still nursing injuries. So because 2 rallies have gone uninterrupted, when you know that 2 weeks from now, when there's another event, you will see the ugly face showing up, is not enough to say that there is a democratic dispensation in this country. But the regime needs that kind of manipulation and deception to create an impression that there is democracy in Uganda, especially at a time when it is facing pressures on account of so many other things, both at home and internationally. You very well know that we filed a complaint at the ICC, and I may not diverge into the details, on the basis of violations of human rights in Uganda. And there are several other avenues that we are pursuing. So there are so many developments, and he said that we are waking up. No. Our engagements against this system sometimes are silent, sometimes they are loud. Now we have chosen to be loud. That's why you are able to see us on the street. But you see, food is not served on the table without cooking. There has been work that has been going on.
Let's look at the entire, opposition politics in Uganda now. Yes, you still have a heartbeat. You still have a heartbeat as NUP. But all the forces of change, most of them have totally been scattered.
Yeah.
Perhaps even a party that was built with sweat, tears, and blood like FDC seems to have imploded. We see an implosion.
People have seen the vision.
What does that indicate where you're headed? Because you needed maybe all Mr. the forces of change together and pushing in one direction.
Maybe Mr. Kamara tell my brother.
This brother of yours needs no help.
Because as Kamara is putting it across, you can see many people after seeing the vision, after understanding what NRM stands for, are running away from any other political party. The other time I told people that there is no opposition today in the country, regardless of the mistakes and a few problems we have in our party.
Let him conclude.
People can see what NRM has stood for in this country. And Mr. Kamara, when you ask him, I wouldn't want him even to struggle a lot looking for the answer. People have seen the reasons why they should join the party of NRM. That's why they are Tatars of FDC. That's why the NUP is sleeping. They are waking up today. That's why we don't remember where DP is today. I don't know.
So,
if I can rephrase that, you need all the forces of change.
I need to answer your question.
Yeah, you need all the forces of change.
He has neither answered your question, he tried to set his and answer it.
No,
you need all the forces of change, at least pushing, working together. But when you see what is happening among your colleagues, really,
you see,
that puts you in a very weaker position, doesn't it?
To understand political dynamics, you must be able to appreciate context. That the case of Uganda is not isolated. Dictatorships fear organized people. And they do everything possible to deny people leadership by discrediting their leaders, by compromising some of them, by humiliating some of them. You have seen opposition leaders being charged with rape, fabricated and trumped up rape charges, treason, and all sorts of things. It's not happening only here, in Senegal, everywhere. All these people that want to manipulate democratic processes, they must make sure that they deny people a chance to be read, because they know even if the entire population is against them, if that population has no leaders, then it can be contained. So she's talking about people leaving other parties to join NRM. There are so many people leaving NRM to join opposition parties. The people who joined the FDC, who started FDC, where were they coming from?
But Mr. Kamara,
where were they coming from? Where was Dr. Besige coming from? Where was Yona Musinguzi coming from? Where were they coming from?
It is about constant persuasion to win.
Exactly. But I am making a specific response to your question about opposition in Tatars, and I believe it is anchored on the recent developments of accusations and counter-accusations of who is in bed with the regime and who is not. And I'm giving you the explanation that that is the context. I agree with you that it would be very good for all forces of change to work together. But I think the more fundamental and more important thing is not even working together, but pursuing the same cause, even if it is on different fronts.
I'm only going to pick, you've talked about many reasons, but one of them was leaders get compromised.
Yes.
So in other words, some people have decided even to put a price on themselves. And we're talking about allegations at the highest level of a political party. Somebody, Secretary General, somebody, President of a party. And if a person at that level, who should be ideologically grounded in the party position and where they should be, who knows where the party should be going, and is the person who, falls short.
Well,
that's a serious problem. And somebody who has put a price on themselves is actually buyable.
And then there's one who is willing to buy instead of convincing.
Yeah, but you see, the other one wants to for you want...
of course, it's unfortunate, but you see, that is the genesis of most of the problems in the country. That if you have a corrupt leader willing to procure people, to bribe people, a corrupt leader leading the country, he was talking about corruption, but you have someone willing to corrupt leaders, to corrupt other people, to give envelopes. That is the genesis of the problems that we are facing.
There are some people who are beyond reproach. There are some people who have not put a price on themselves. There are some people who could say, for what I stand for, there's not enough money in the world to buy.
I agree.
To buy my integrity.
That's why I said it's unfortunate if indeed it's true that the leaders being talked about have indeed been procured. It's unfortunate. Benjamin, but since I have no information, I cannot...
Yeah, that's why I'm avoiding giving the names. Benjamin and Yona, hold on your point, Benjamin and Yona, because you're going to take a break. But when we come back, I'm going to be able to read your questions or comments that you're sending on our platforms, different social media platforms. And please keep it civil, even if you disagree with this gentleman. That's normal, but you can disagree with respect. And I'll read them so that my guests can be able to respond, because you need to have your say. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Kamara. My guests tonight are Mr. Benjamin Katana, who is a lawyer for National Unity Platform and treasurer. Also, the Honorable Yona Musinguzi, who is a member of parliament representing Ntungamo Municipality. This is the moment when you have to have your say, and let me read your comments and questions that you've been sending on our social media platform. I'm beginning with Okello Patrick from Busega. He says, the NUP country tour is just a honeymoon which can be ended anytime by the one in charge. NUP has been allowed to move around just to impress the West, that there is democracy in Uganda where opposition can move freely and probably soften their heart of World Bank and lend us soft loan. If it can go on for some time, well, good luck, but the regime will not tolerate this for long. Thank you, Patrick Okello in Busega. I go to Odella Jacob. Odella says, tour to the regime is equalizing it to MK movement for purposes of camouflage and concealment. Our NUP need not to celebrate the temporal freedom offered to them. The truth would only be revealed when institutions like Electoral Commission, justice and security organs manage to work in their lanes. But all these events are just for formality, but also to authenticate the donor accountability. Waking up simply means encountering the true revelation of ensuring that electorates aren't intimidated with the thinking that 1986 events could occur in case of regime change, which creates fears in the population. So waking up means no one will ever cause such. Thank you. And he says he's a honorable hopeful for Gweri County, Odella Jacob. Thank you so much, Odella Jacob. Let me go to Aaron's message, who says the smallest geographical Western electoral area with just 11 million people has 270 MPs, whereas the bigger regions like Buganda has 91 MPs, Eastern 81 and Northern 84. Whether elections are free and fair as described, the strongholds will determine the political direction. The logic of representation is already manipulated. Elections are just symbolic. Aaron's message, thank you so much for your view. And I'm going to pick two more, and then I'll keep it at that. Good evening, Patrick. My name is Dan Ainembabazi Musime from Bushenyi. NRM is still strong compared by Dan Musime. Okay, Dan Musime, MP to be. I think some of you are trying now to campaign indirectly. Good evening, independents. I'd like to thank our NUP National Party Treasurer for his brilliant explanation on Uganda's waking up. I hope the NRM people understood him better. Thank you. You haven't put a name, but we thank you for your message. Okay, probably now you want to respond to some of those views that are, most of them are not asking you questions, but maybe to begin with you, Benjamin, how do you respond to some of those comments from our viewers tonight?
Well, thank you. Most of them are comments and indeed a confirmation that the population is awake that these processes are largely manipulative and manipulated by the regime. And I'm sure with that level of civic competence, if it can be spread to the last person on the radar of our society, on the ladder of our society, then we'll be able to achieve what we want to achieve. Because civic competence is one of the key ingredients in building resistance against oppression.
All right, and how do you respond to how do you appreciate those comments? And
I want to appreciate someone from Bushenyi and other comments from the NUP side, talking what my brother was talking about. But in summary, I would want to say what alternative program NUP has on table will shape the future of the next election. If your alternative is better than what NRM has to offer, you'll take the show. You are busy moving around the country with no program. NRM is busy mobilizing under emyoga. He's busy mobilizing, that is for the youth, under parish development model with some of its problems which can be solved.
There's also something called MK.
And he's confirming that those are not developmental platforms but mobilizational platforms.
Please.
It's refused now.
If you don't sit down, by the way, I come from a background that is even close to where you are now. But why I left that background is because if you don't sit down and clear your house, you are talking of dictator. Who is a dictator? Can you define a dictator? You are talking of a corrupt leader. Who is a corrupt leader? A dictator or corrupt leader is not your problem. The problem of opposition is failing to give alternative, the best alternative to the voter.
Okay.
The best alternative to Ugandans. Only moving around organizing support is not enough.
Our time is out. Let me ask each one of you to give us your concluding remark, beginning with you, Benjamin.
Thank you very much, Kamara and NTV, for the opportunity to share my views with the people of Uganda and those that are watching. I also thank the people in Western Uganda who have turned up in big numbers to welcome our team and register solidarity with the message for change. And we'll be coming to the central, the east, and the north with a similar change. And to emphasize that our mission is to build a fairer and inclusive society. That Yona from Ntungamo and Katana from Kapchorwa, when they are vying for a job, the consideration should be met. If they are bidding, no, I'm just using our names as examples. If Kamara from Bushenyi, where I come from, and Katana from Fort Poto,
and Yona from Buru,
are bidding for a contract, that it will be awarded on the basis of the merit of the documents they have submitted.
Okay.
And so that the removal of the dictatorship that we have been talking about is one of the milestones in our journey of liberating the country in terms of politics, in terms of economy, and generally with the mission of improving the livelihoods of the people of Uganda.
Thank you very much. Yona, your parting shot.
Thank you, Kamara, for the chance. Thank you, the viewers, for listening to our views. They may be different views, but listening to us is important. However, I call upon this country, let us not be dragged into people seeking for self-development. Let us listen to government programs. We get out of poverty. People want service delivery than campaigning, confusing the country all over for campaigns every day and now. Let's have alternatives that equally match with the what is NRM, then there we will be on the same table. But if you don't have alternatives, moving around the country is not enough. And I thank the viewers.
Thank you very much. And yes, they have divergent views for a reason. Sometimes they can differ, sometimes they can be heated. Not that because they hate each other, but I want to believe because they love their country more. I know we have a great country and we can be good people and we deserve better. As a country, we've had a tumultuous past, but we always pull through and always come out. I am eternally optimistic that Uganda, we shall get there at one moment. And though sometimes we know the issue of the Benjamins, and I'm not meaning Katana, the Benjamins. It's all about the Benjamins. Good night and God bless Uganda.